Prabhu is a senior analytics developer. And Ravi, I'm not sure how to make sense out of your CV here, but you're coding solutions to solve world problems. So please take it away.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, let's start. I think I'm Ravi. I'm going to do the tough theory part, and then my friend Prabhu is going to do the fancy demo part. I think that works. Okay, I think I'll start with the story of Formula Modeler. Any enterprise solutions, right? Like for instance, now the formula logic is kind of getting very critical. So you take mortgage calculations, you take financial risk calculations, you take pensions, anything. So it's like nowadays, like for instance, we want to have all these complex formulas done in a full stack applications in the UI. And then the business users also want to have these formulas run by them. They don't want to depend on any of the IT teams because like the realization part, it's taking ages. So that's one of the very important problem, number one. And then, sorry. Oh, sorry. Yeah, thanks. I think you would get 1 minute extra for this. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Having said that, this is very important problem, right? Like for instance, the formula has to be modeled. And then what happens in an ideal world is like you will have multiple departments, let's say, and then like they want to have all the formulas run by each of these different departments. Sales has the formula, and then like sales underscore final can be one of the document. Finance underscore final can be one of the document. At the end, we'll have many final documents, but then like what should be configured at the end. So that's also when we're very critical. So we don't have one place solution where all the formulas can be run. So having said that, this is a very important problem at this point of time. Formula can be very simple. So you can just say, okay, what is the price? Price can be just my margin into cost. That can be a simple formula. Then this could be possible with any of the traditional UI-based formula builder, or I could also have a procedure run with scripted views or scripted that could also do this function. But then like when the formula becomes complex, right? Like you introduce many dimensions and then you have many nested structures. That's when it becomes complex. We thought we have to handle this. We had a problem and we wanted to build something. So whether we go into the standard way or what do we do? Then we thought, okay, let's build some creative solutions of. That's how this started. And so what basically this does is a central application which could be used by any business users, where the formulas would be built at one place, stored at one place, centrally available, no duplications, nothing, could be used by any users. So that's what basically this formula modeler does. And uh, we also did this way, like for instance, okay, I would quickly run into, I think like, yeah, the top, no, sorry. Yeah. This is basically the flowchart how it works. So it's like uh, what we do is like this application. It has like for instance the IT team would want to have this calculation view models exposed. It's like because there are multiple different teams that are involved. So it's like all the calculation views. That's the starting point. After that is exposed, and then it's all the business users who runs through. So it's like they have these models which should be scope of their models that should be consumed, and then it can be the same business user or it can be a different business user who can configure the formulas that has to be used. So he can use these models which were exposed and then they can create the formulas. Meaning like for instance, if I want to define a formula, let's say uh, price is equal to cost plus margin. So that's a formula that I would define. If I have to define this, then I would want to have my price as well as my margin in my model. So that's the prerequisite. And then after that, I would just invoke this formula. So any application that would want to consume this formula can be used. So it can just use this formula, which is centrally available, and then like they can run. And after that, the it is just two ways. So it's like you can either have the API which can run, or it can be a direct query inside the database. And then the business user just validates the formula, and then he can just apply this. This is a very simple way. And then if you still come down, this is one example formula that we listed here. So everything is available in GitHub. So it's like if you have a formula, let's say list price into discount by 100. So it's like normally you just have this. So any database, right? It just sees as a plain text. But then like we use something known as the HANA graph, which Prabhu will explain in a detailed way, where it uses the directed acyclic graphs that could convert this into, like, for instance, the trees as nested small trees structure, and that could define this in a way that the database understands. And then like, yeah. And then without wasting much time, I think like we'll quickly go into the demo.
Thank you, Ravi. Yeah, so to begin with, the first step would be, which Ravi was explaining, adding models to the whole formula modeler utility. So you would have IT teams building these HANA calculation views. So these calculation views, right, typically you would have dimensions and measures. First step would be having somebody from the business saying that, okay, this calculation view model should be now part of my formula model. So that'd be first step. So let me just go ahead and do that. Add, say, this one. So I'm just going to add this formula, give it a name. Okay, so that's now what just happened is it's now part of the scope of the formula modeler utility. So it's not a fancy UI, but that's basically because it's sort of the application is meant to be used in terms of API. So you would see this part actually embedded in the real, other applications. If you had a sales application or a finance application, you would see this UI embedded as part of that application. So, but this is just for the demo purpose. We are showing it in an integrated fashion. So you also see variables. So that's also possible. You could have like global numbers that you want to say, okay, currency. That's sort of things that could be used in a formula. So you could also define that here. So now let's go into the actual formula modeler. So this is the screen. So we'll just go ahead and consume that model that we just created now. So we added this one, step 2. Okay. So give it a name. Formula. Just give it some name. So you've given key fields. These are all the dimensions of that calculation view that I chose. These are all the measures that are available for me to make that formula. These are the operators. So you see a bunch of the traditional mathematical formulas, aggregation formulas, and also window functions. Because why we chose these is because this is what we see in typically with most of the customers, that they want business to dynamically create these formulas and implement immediately into certain models, not having to go to IT team and create a calculation view and things. So I'm just not going to type it and take a lot of time. So I'll just copy paste a formula that I already did. So it's basically the same thing. You see all these fields, base rate, age factor. All these are the measures that you already see here. And you also see a Windows function being used. It says, okay, claim account, group it by region, give me the maximum, apply that into this formula. And yeah, this is the entire. And there's also a variable being used here. So it basically replaces that with the value of the variable that we saw in a different screen. So it's mandatory that you select dimensions, because of course without dimensions it doesn't have meaning. Step 3, first thing, validate. So it's now part of the model, the data model. Does a data preview, which basically says that, okay, the calculation worked. It was able to parse that formula that you entered, and it gives you some sort of a preview. It's not the entire data, but a preview of the data that is there. So it's good to know now what happens. So the interesting part, right? So we are all from the HANA community, so we want to see what's happened in HANA really. So I'm just going to copy this first part, the ID. It copies each individual formula as a GUID. So that ID identifies that formula basically. With that, I'm going to Database Explorer. Okay. So my colleague told about this graph workspace. So let's go there. So there's a graph that was created, and within the graph is where all these formulas are stored. A graph, of course, has nodes. That's the vertices and the edges. Let's look at this specific formula that we created now. Formula ID equal to the GUID that I just entered. Apply. So it's showing, but we can't make sense of it obviously because these are all GUIDs. Under the hood, these form the edges. So when you do a formula, you have to follow a certain precedence rule, right? So certain calculations, say for example, multiplication operator or division operator needs to be evaluated first before you go into addition operator or subtraction. So that sort of a thing is formed here in this, in this chart. So quickly looking, right? So I just ran this. These are the tables that form the graph. So they underlie the graph nodes and edges. So you see something called the nodes here, the edges. The data actually goes and sits in them, and the graph engine of SAP HANA knows how to form that as a network diagram. Let's just look at the nodes one specifically, and I filter that to the formula ID that I created now, and just to help to navigate, right? So this is the first node, the root node, and it starts with FC2 something something. You see that somewhere? Yeah, this one. So this is the root node, basically saying that the formula starts from here, and then it goes down, starts with the first operator, the plus operator, essentially going to the formula back. It's basically saying, take this whole formula, move this to the right, move this to the left. Then it goes down, move something else to the right, move something else to the left. Goes on and on and on until it gets to all the nodes. So if you go, if you click on any of the leaves, you would see they're all operators. They're actually the values. So the whole thing sits in the graph. Then obviously, can it be calculated? How is it being used? That's the next question, right? So going back to the formula editor, here you see something called a proxy DB object. So I'm just going to copy that for the one that we just created now. Go under functions, filter, and select that one. Okay, so you see a create statement. This statement essentially says select something, a bunch of dimensions, and that formula that we made, but now in SQL parlance, in the HANA specific SQL parlance, and saying, okay, put that output into O_calculated from the HANA model that we just now added. So this SQL was formed by parsing that graph. And let's go to now to that part of HANA, which does that parsing. Wait, where's it? Yeah, here it is. And this. So it's this procedure. It's a language graph, not SQL script. And it's a simple, and this is the reason we chose this technology, because out of the box, SAP provides these algorithms that does, you could do a depth first search, breadth first search, Dijkstra algorithm, whatever kind of generic graph traversal algorithms that you want to use, you could easily use. In this case, we chose DFS. That helped us, form this formula on the fly. It's a simple formula, so I'm not going through the code, but what essentially it does is go to each node, look at the left, look at the right, put them together, go down, on and on and on until you form the entire formula. So it's just as simple as that. At the end of it, you basically get the whole formula put together in that executable formula. So that's basically the technology. I'm just going to also show you the architecture to stitch together everything. So this is how, there are two patterns. You could have, okay, one essential thing is it should be the same database, obviously, because otherwise we cannot access, the formula modeler cannot access the objects sitting in the other containers. So that's essential part. But if it is the same, same sub account, you could either access through the proxy object that I showed you. You could do container to container conversation, or you could do API to API. So we have APIs for all types of activities, creating a formula, updating a formula, retrieving data in batch mode if the volume is really large, all of that. What was the benefit? Why we did this? Because this function is generated design time, which means SAP HANA as an engine knows about this query and it can optimize the query. So that's the whole idea. We took this approach, and it's not done on the fly at runtime. Yeah, so that's on time. So
Great. Interesting to see how you take a formula, decompose it in a directed acyclic graph, and then use graph traversal operations to kind of bring that into an executable state. So I'm completely amazed. Other questions? Claude.
Very impressive work. Your formula, just background, it is defined on an entity. Can you just give us the word on that entity? What is the object you're applying the formula on? And what kind of structure is that object or entity?
Yeah.
Just a word on that, thanks.
yeah, sure. So what we see is going back. So if you have an application like a finance application, so you'd have people maintaining finance data on it. It's typically built on 1 or 2 calculation views under the hood. But what happens is, you might want to create formulas on the fly. On the raw level, it's a calculation view, but a calculation view constitutes of dimensions and measures. So what we enable is, from the formula modeler, go to that object, retrieve all the dimensions and measures, allow the user on the fly, on a web browser-based interface, be able to build that formula. So essentially here the entity, from a business user perspective, is they are working on a workbench, a table with a set of columns. Under the hood, it's a calculation view.
So I'm a dummy now, I'm not a coder.
Oh.
The formula is defined on what? A record, an object?
Oh, no, column. A column of a lot of rows.
A column of a lot of rows. Okay, thank
exactly.
you.
Yeah.
Other questions? Then I'll have one. I mean, this sounds like a custom solution. How do we get it? How can I get it?
Yeah, we've put it out on GitHub, so it's available. If we still have ideas of how we should improve it, one of them being we need to introduce, say, a time series forecasting. That's something that most of our applications need. We haven't built that functionality yet. And we also need a pluggable UI. So right now, you saw this UI. It's not so very polished. It's just for demo because we custom make the UI for each target audience. It would be nice if we have an embeddable UI. So we have some good ideas. If anybody could contribute and do it also would be great. So it's available on GitHub.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Pardon? Sorry. Yeah, it's tinyurl.com/formula modeler. It was not part of the documentation, I know.
Not sure if I got it, but how can you consume then the result? Do you have to go through your API, or is there some calculation view created which you can then consume?
So two ways. One is API, and that's basically. I'm not sharing
Can
anymore.
we reshare?
Okay, I can do that. And share.
Sorry, you got 2 minutes.
Okay. Okay. So this is an API available, which basically says, oh, but I need that formula ID that I just now created. So the formula editor, copy the ID, written here.
Your question is to access the formula.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So this API, these are the fields that I had chosen as dimensions, and this is the output, and it's a generic field name. So what would happen is that consuming application says, okay, send this ID, give me the data, it gets this, plugs it into the table, and it is shown on the API. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. No, that's the function that I showed. Basically, this function that got generated is essentially wrapping around that calculation view that the user selected, and it's written that formula by traversing the graph. Also possible. We chose this because of the flexibility. Yeah, it's also possible. It has to be a DB object. That is essentially important. Yeah.
Okay, then we are at the end of the session. I would like also to ask you to stay around in the expert corner, just around the corner, so you can still ask some questions. Thank you very much once again.